Hi, I'm Frank Govea. I'm with the Vermeer division of RDO Equipment Company, and today we're going to learn all about a BC1000 chipper. We'll be doing the control panel, safety, and then maintenance. First, we'll be starting with the controls of the machine. So when you turn the key to the on position, it'll say wait to start. This is the glow plugs of the engine warming up. This display only monitors engine functions. So you've got battery voltage, your hours of the machine. By pressing these arrow buttons, you scroll through all the other stuff. You've got coolant temperature, RPMs, oil pressure, hours on the machine, and back to battery voltage. In the event of an engine fault, it'll be displayed here with either a yellow light or a red light. Red light will shut off the engine. That indicates that it's a severe problem that needs to be addressed. Okay. Next, you have your Eco Idle button, and this button is for fuel savings and noise abatement. So when it's down on the bottom setting, after 1 minute of inactivity, the machine will come down to an idle and wait for someone to press the green button. Idle will come back up. The feed wheel will start feeding material in again. If you have it in the uppermost position, that's after 5 minutes of inactivity, the machine comes down to an idle. If it's in the center position, the machine will never come down to an idle. It'll just sit there and drink diesel the whole time, wasting fuel. Next, we have the smart feed system. This was designed to prevent plugging of the chipper. When you have it in the log setting, that's for 12-inch material, 10-inch. What this does, the computer monitors your engine speed. When the engine slows down about 200 RPMs, the feed roller will stop feeding the material, pull it back slightly to allow that drum speed to come back up to make sure that all the chips come out. When you're putting big wood in there, there's a lot of material in the drum housing. So the engineers have figured out it needs to spin at a certain RPM to guarantee that all the chips come out. When you have it in the middle setting, that is for your branches, 4 6-inch material. Maybe about 400 RPMs, you'll see the feed roller stop and then start again once it's come up to a reset point. Your lower setting is for brush, very small stuff, maybe about 600 RPMs before the feed roller stops feeding. This is your fuel gauge. And this port here is where we connect our laptop to look at our computer that's here. The engine has its own computer as well with a connection port. This button here, this is for the safety bar down here. So when you first start up the machine is always in the safest mode, which is normal sensitivity, which means if this bar were to go in about halfway, the feed roller stops feeding, the amber information light in the back blinks rapidly, letting you know that this bar has been struck. This is for the safety of the operator. Should someone get pulled in by a branch, a portion of your body will strike this bar and stop the feed roller from feeding. If you're putting material that's constantly striking this bar and stopping, and you have to come over here and hit the green button to restart, you can put this bar into reduced sensitivity. By pressing this button here on the bottom, press that button there, the amber light in the back will now be lit the whole time, giving you a visual warning that this bar is now in reduced sensitivity, which means it needs to go almost all the way in before the feed roller will stop. Okay? At any time, you can press that button again to put it back into normal sensitivity. The light will go off, and now it's in the safer mode. Anytime you turn the machine off and start it back up, it will always start in the safest mode. Okay? Anytime this bar is struck, the light in the back will blink rapidly. Okay? We'll move on to our control bar here. When you push the control bar all the way forward, you're in reverse. You need to hold the bar if you want the feed roller to go in reverse. Once you let it go, you're now in this stop or neutral position. By pulling it one more into this direction, now you're in forward feed. and the machine will feed forward by striking the green button. Okay. The other side of the machine also has another, they call this a hold to run button to start the feed rollers. Okay. We'll move over here to the clutch system. This is just putting tension on a belt. So after you've started the machine and you let it warm up for a bit, you can come over here and slowly engage the belt tension. It's going to make some noise, and that's normal. And once you pull it all the way down, you can either push it towards the engine, and that'll be at idle with the belt engaged and the drum turning, or you can come straight over into high speed and start chipping. This machine will only chip in high speed. Okay, that's similar to those droop settings. Once the machine slows down to a certain speed, the feed roller stops. Okay, after you've started it and engaged it, and now you're chipping, when you're done chipping, you want to bring it over to an idle with the belt engaged, wait for the machine to come all the way down to an idle, and then at that point, you can disengage the belt tension, come back over here, and turn your machine off. Next, we have the feed chute. To rotate your feed chute, you pull this lever down, push it to the left to hold it in place, and now you can rotate your chute wherever you'd like it. The chute has 270 degrees of rotation, so it's going to stop somewhere in this direction here. Same with the other side. There's a 90-degree window in the very back that the chute will not go to, and that's to protect the people loading limbs into the machine so it doesn't shoot the chips onto them. Okay. And then you also have a deflector up there. You can deflect the chips upwards or shoot them straight downwards. If you're broadcasting onto a hillside, you can point them in wherever you want by loosening that lever there and manually moving that deflector. Okay, now we're going to touch on safety and safe operation of the machine. Every machine that Vermeer makes comes with a DVD that goes over safety and operation, regardless of what machine it is. You can also find them online, YouTube. Just be sure that you view the latest version. Some of the videos that are online are from older machines that don't apply now, but every machine comes with one of these. So this decal here has a lot of good information on it in regards to safety do's and don'ts. So this one shows someone climbing into the infeed. You don't ever want to do that. This one shows a rope being pulled into the machine. Ropes around brush piles, climbers in the trees with the tail ropes in the brush, very dangerous. If a rope were to go in there and fed into that drum, it's pulled in very quickly and can absolutely kill you. So the dangers of rope, be aware of them. Check your brush pile before loading it into the chipper. This one here shows somebody standing back here to load the brush. This is considered the danger zone. If you're standing back here loading, you have a chance of being caught by a branch and pulled into the machine. You always want to load material from the side and turn away. You want to turn away because branches going in there will swing back and forth and can strike you. These have a high side here, so if you are accidentally caught, this will also prevent you from being pulled into the machine. Okay. Our next picture here shows the danger zone. Okay, so consider all this area back here a danger zone. As you're feeding material in, the feed roller's raising up and you can see the drum with the knives attached to it. Material will come back at you. These plastic rubber flaps here are meant to deflect small pieces, but large ones will pass through, so you don't want to stand here and get struck by one of those. Next, we have a picture of gloves. Okay, showing you a picture of the big welder's gloves with the cuffs. Those are no good because you can have a branch come in and grab your glove and draw you into the machine. You always want to wear gloves that are tight fitting around the wrist, minimize the chance of being pulled in by a branch. Okay. Next one there shows somebody trying to reach for the feed wheel. Don't want to do that. Vermeer has designed this in-feed table that's long enough and the feed rollers far enough in to where you cannot touch that without striking this bar first, okay? We've tried it with very tall people and they hit this every time. All right, this picture here shows somebody climbing into the machine to push the small pieces in that have not quite made it to the feed roller. You never want to do that. You always keep a push stick or an additional a branch to push that material in. Should the branch get pulled in, taken away, it's okay. It's not going to destroy the machine. You don't ever want to use a shovel or anything metal. If it goes into the machine, it will destroy the machine. Okay. This last picture here shows a picture of a rope and the in-feed table. As you can see, it's pretty hidden back here. There's your feed roller. So if you have a chainsaw in there, a backpack blower, cones, anything stored in there, and you go to the next job site, drop this down, start the machine, start feeding, whatever's back here will go through the chipper, okay? So it's good practice to always take a look in there and make sure there's nothing stored in the in-feed. In an emergency, when this is operating, feeding forward, you can dive for this bar, push it in any direction, and it will stop the feed roller. Or you can strike this lower safety bar to stop the feed roller. Should someone be pulled in, material that you don't want going through there, a T-stake or a piece of iron, you can dive for this in any direction. The chippers are equipped with these flags here, and this is for the driver of the truck so he's able to see the machine, okay? When this machine is pretty narrow compared to the chip truck, you lose sight of it when you're backing up and you could damage the tongue, the hood, the chute. So when backing up, you may want to have these out to assist you so you can see where the chipper is. Up here we have some safety issues that are good to know. When connecting the chipper to the truck, the chains are crossed. You also have the electric breakaway cable. This should never be connected to a chain. If the chain were to fall off and this is connected to the chain, it will never pull this safety out should the machine become detached from the truck. Always have this attached to the truck, okay? Your lights are there. And one other thing is always have your PPE, personal protective equipment, okay? You got gloves, hearing protection, eye protection. Very important. Some companies also insist on steel-toed shoes. Good thing if you drop a log on there, you won't lose a toe. So one thing you want to do is just give a walk around the machine and look for any bolts that are missing, components that are off. A lot of times this thing will come off like that. Debris will start to come out of there. So a general walk around of the machine to inspect it overall. Okay, and then next after that?
Condition of knives.
Knives. Okay, every 10 hours you should be checking the condition of the knives. You do this by opening the door above the drum and take a look at what the knives look like. Here's an example of a normal wear on a knife, okay? When it's about as round as a ballpoint pen, this knife edge is done and it needs to be rotated to use the other sharp side, okay? This side here has gone way too far, okay? Both of these edges will still cut wood, but it's like trying to cut wood with a hammer, okay? You'll get through it eventually, but it's gonna hurt your arm. Same with the machine. It's very hard on the bearings. You'll have, from excessive vibration, bolts may start to come loose, sheet metal may start to crack. So when it gets to this point, it's time to flip them around, okay? If you open it up and you have something like this, okay? This is damage from stones, pieces of metal and stuff. and these pieces become dangerous projectiles. Okay, they will come out of this machine like a bullet through the 1/4-inch plate steel. Most of the time when we encounter that, it's using the snow shovel at the end of the day, scooping up stones that are on the ground when you're trying to gather all the small stuff. Best practice is to either use a big rake or shake it out, or just throw it directly into the truck or a garbage can. So the other thing, at every 50 hours, you should be checking the shear bar. This is where the other half of the cutting process happens. So as your knife is coming around like this, material's being fed in, the knife strikes the wood and it presses it into this little angle here, okay? And it holds it for a split second to chop the wood and create a chip. If your shear bar is worn like this excessively, okay, what's going to happen now is that your knife is going to strike the wood and drag it through. There's nothing to hold it underneath, so it's going to create long strips, and that will lead to plugging of the chipper. So every 50 hours you should be looking at the shear bar, and as it starts to get slightly rounded like here, it's time to flip it around. You can use this shear bar 4 times, okay? You've got this edge that's being worked, you could spin it around and work this edge, and you flip it over, you've got 2 more edges here, okay? So every 50 hours, should take a peek at that.
Where is that located, Frank?
It's located underneath the drum, so you've got a trap door underneath.
Okay.
The easiest way I found was to take the tongue jack that's on the front and put it onto the side here to raise the feed roller up, and then you can crawl in there with a flashlight. Be sure everything's off, key is pulled out, and you can check the condition of the shear bar. Okay. Should you guys need to flip it around, the machine comes with this gauge, or knife gauge, and this is to set the distance, the shear bar and the knife. So the shear bar is what moves in and out for adjusting. The knife stays permanently mounted on the drum, okay? So the best way to check this is to lay the shear bar, or lay the gauge on the shear bar at the same angle, and as your knife comes around in an arc, when it gets the closest to that shear bar, that's your distance there, okay? It's about 1/8 of an inch, okay? You want to check both sides of the knives. You have a knife mounted on the drum here and another one here, 180 degrees apart. So one knife will pass here and the other knife passes here. So you check this side, you go, okay, that looks good. You come over here and it's like, whoa, that's too big. So you can scooch that a little further, then check it and go, okay, that's good. Double check the other side, and then you can torque your bolts down. And that's done from underneath, okay? So there's a trap door underneath the machine that you can also use the knife gauge on, or you can crawl in through the infeed here and do the same thing on the infeed side. So here's some examples of what happens when a knife shatters. This is right by the door where you check the knives. So you can see it's like a bullet coming through this 1/4-inch plate steel, okay? There's pieces of a knife that have come apart when we take a look at the inside of the machine. There's a knife that has come off and is by the trap door under the machine. So you can see the force of the knife when it comes out. And that will go in any direction, up, down, sideways. There's one of a knife that has exited the chute, okay? So it came out of the neck of the chute and it went somewhere. So if you're standing near this machine and a piece of knife comes out, it's very dangerous, okay? So changing the knives is very important that it's done correctly. It's in the maintenance manual. It's also in the operator's manual because it's so important. Even though it's a maintenance item, they put it in the operator's manual. There's also a decal located right here. That shows you step by step how to change the knives, okay? So your decal is right here. Step by step on how to change knives. Changing the knives is most important because that comes off, it's very dangerous and can destroy the machine. Next on the list is greasing the drum bearings. Okay, this is the one thing that gets done at the end of the day. All right, and the reason for that is as this machine is working, grease is being expelled out of the bearing and it's warm. So if you put it away after you've used it and there's a lot of hollow areas in that bearing, condensation will form inside that bearing and just leads to early bearing failure. So the best way to do it at the end of the day, you get your grease gun. You want to start with the bearing that's located on the other side. We'll go over here. So the reason you want to start with the bearing on this side is because you can see it easily, all right? The proper way to grease this machine is with the bearing in motion. So at the end of the day, you can take it out of high speed, drop it down to an idle, let it come down to an idle, and then start putting the grease in on this side. If you're using a manual pump gun, count the number of pumps that you're putting into this bearing, and what you're going to see when it's full, grease will come out of the edge of this bearing, and that way now it's full, there's no hollow spots. So if you put 45 pumps on this side, you want to put the same on the other side, okay? That bearing is not easily seen like this one. And we get a lot of questions, 45, it's because yes, that's a pretty big bearing and every shot of grease is about the size of a pea. So there's going to be a lot of peas to fill that bearing. Okay, there's two other locations that get grease at the end of the day. This is the bearing on your other side. But the other two locations that get grease are the pillow block bearings located here. They're on each side of the pulley for the drive belt. So you have two fittings right here. Start with this one on the outside because you can see through these slots the bearing. So when you start there and you're going maybe about 10 pumps of grease, you'll see it come out of the side of that bearing. You want to put the same amount on the one inside as well, okay? Then all other lubrication spots are shown on this decal here. The way to interpret this decal is the innermost line tells you how many fittings are where it's pointing to. So for example, our drum bearings there, it's pointing to the drum bearing there, tells you there's two fittings, one here, one on the other side. 5-hour line, it says that's where you would put grease. The grease gun is empty. Should have a number in there, but they're showing you this icon there. It's a grease fitting with arrows, meaning put grease in there until it comes out, okay? The same with those two bearings up front. Tells you there's two, 5-hour line, put grease in there until it comes out. These bearings get grease at the end of the day no matter how many hours you use it. The reason why they put it on a 5-hour line, if you're using this machine for more than 5 hours in one day, when you hit 5 hours, stop, grease the machine, and then continue working. If you only use the machine for an hour or two, still, end of the day, grease it. But the 5-hour line is maximum you should go before you have to re-grease it. Other locations is this point right here, showing you there's two fittings. This is the pivot for the feed roller. Two fittings. It says 1 shot of grease every 50 hours. Okay, clearly this one's had a lot more than 1 shot of grease every 50 hours. But the good thing is, any of these places that you grease, you cannot hurt the machine by over greasing. All it's going to do is just make a mess. All right. So you've got your jack up front. Also has a fitting. 1 shot of grease every 250 hours. Should take a shot of grease. So if you've never seen the grease fitting on your tongue jack, there's one just right by the crank handle to lube the bevel gears in there. So that's how you interpret the lube chart. If not, the most important thing is this. You've got to check this, all right? This is what's going to save your life. So if this bar is not working, you have the chance of going through the machine. So the way to check this, start the machine up, put it into high speed, because you have to have it in high speed for the feed rollers to start moving, okay? And then you want to bump this bar about halfway, make sure the feed roller stops, the light in the back will blink rapidly, then move it to reduced sensitivity. The light in the back is going to be on solid, giving you the warning that this bar is now less sensitive, and take and push it in all the way, make sure that that feed roller stops. You also have a third stop, which is this bar here. By pulling it once that way will stop the feed roller. So you want to make sure that this stop also works and the light blinks rapidly. Very important. If any of these do not work, the machine is not safe. Do not take it out. Okay?
I have a question about
Yes.
the safety bar. We ended up at a job site and we couldn't figure out why it wouldn't roll, and one of the bolts was off. So after
I saw the replacement one's been put in
we
there.
figured it out, and then
right.
oh, we can't work without that.
Right. If
But
any,
we put it up and head it out.
that's a good point. If any one of these three safety switches are not operating, it will not feed in forward. It's a safety.
So we loaded up and took off.
One thing, also, if you're operating this machine in the safest mode, and you've got a big long branch going in there, and you see that it's dragging something, and you know it's going to strike this, you can hold this green button on either side, and it will override that temporarily. You got about 10 seconds. You can hold this down. The limb can strike that bar, and then continue feeding without stopping. One thing you want to make sure of is that you're standing back here when you're holding that. If you're standing here feeding the limb, you can get struck in the face. So just you stand back here, you watch it hits the bar, and then you can let go. Okay? Okay, that's more for whoever's servicing the machine. Like I showed you on the service maintenance intervals, there are things that need to be done beyond your dailies. So if a machine were new at 50 hours, for example, the hydraulic filter needs to be changed. At 250 hours, it's an oil change. So however you monitor it, a lot of companies will put a decal up here saying next service due, X amount of hours. That way the operator, when they turn the key on, they go, oh, we're at 300 hours.
Where are we?
We need, you're at 175 hours. So whoever's operating the machine can see the hours and go, oh, okay, it's time for service, and get it into the shop for service work. Okay? And then if there's any problems with the machine, contact your general foreman, whoever the lead is. Let somebody know that there's a problem with the machine. And that concludes our training.